Hello and welcome to the Browns Blitz. Today is Tuesday, December the 8th. I'm your host, Rod Bloom. Got a great show for you tonight. Joining us today, first of all, is my brother, Jeff. How are things going, Jeff?
9-3, Rod. Couldn't be better.
That's right. And we got a special guest. John Cahill is with us all the way from Ireland. John, how are you?
I am great, Rod. Fantastic to be with you guys. Instead, just like Jeff alluded to there, 9-3, etched in very freshly in our brains here at the moment. Soon to be 10-3.
Yes. We're jumping all the way to the end of the program with predictions, I think. But I like it. It sounds excellent. So, yeah. It's great to talk to you, John. We wanted to have you on for quite a while, and it's just good to talk to you. So, first thing we're going to do here is talk about what we're drinking, and we like to let the guests go first. I know you've got a little something special over there, unique to your homeland. So, why don't you give us a breakdown on what you're drinking?
I got lots of specials, Rod. Lots of specials. I said my I actually have I'm one of those lucky people that I actually have a beer fridge in my house, and it's just because my significant other is also a fan of the arts of craft breweries. So we tend to stock up when we can and have a decent selection there. But I went with something just for the night that was in it. I went with something very what we might call basically Irish. I went for a can of draft Beamish Irish Stout. Now, I don't know, like when American tourists come to Ireland, they generally end up drinking pints of Guinness, and that's kind of, you'll find a pint of Guinness in every pub that you go to in Ireland. You won't find a pint of Beamish in every pub you go to in Ireland unless you go to Cork. So Beamish would be very specifically local to County Cork, and it is it'd be like the Guinness's poor relation. The little brother, Guinness's little brother. But as I've got older, I have developed a taste for the more robust charcoal flavour of this stout. So very charcoaly, very coffee bean, kind of burnt coffee, and very creamy head. So it has hits all the right notes for me at the minute. And for a more refined, more mature drinker, it is the thing to have on a freezing cold night in December in Ireland.
Nice. So it has maybe just a stronger flavor to it than Guinness, John?
Yeah. Guinness would be what I would describe maybe, or what people would generally describe maybe as a session drink. With regards to it's a bit, I think Guinness is about 4%, something like that. It's quite light. And the taste of Guinness, it would be a lot more creamy. Guinness is a lot more creamy and a lot more light. This is a lot more robust. It's a lot more sort of charcoal coffee kind of burnt kind of notes off it, like, from. And just we were talking off air just before we came on. I have a bit of a background in the brewing industry from years ago, working as a trainee brewer. Like the ingredients, like sort of that you're looking at, like chocolate malt, or sort of the burnt malt kind of flavors that you get from Beamish. That's kind of what attracts me to it. Like, you get a little punch. You get a little punch off it when you drink it, whereas Guinness kind of flows down a lot more, and you'd know you had a few of these when you've had 3 or 4 cans. You'd know you're after drinking them.
Well, I would think, yeah. I usually know when I've had 3 or 4 of pretty much anything, John. But I guess it depends how much of a drinker some of us are. I am drinking a Southern Tier 2 Xmas Christmas spiced double ale tonight. This is 8% beer. I've talked about this on the show before. If you like the Great Lakes Christmas ale, give this one a try. It's a very good, well done Christmas beer. I've tried quite a few Christmas ales, and for me, some of them kind of taste like they kind of just threw a bunch of stuff in there, kind of spun it all together, and it really doesn't have any particular flavor to it. This beer, you can actually taste spices and the different flavors, and it's got a very, very nice flavor to it, with all those spices combined. But you can actually still tell what's in the beer. So I like that. Definitely good and recommended. Jeff's taking the night off, so that's going to do it for our Blitz beverages. Now, John, we're going to give you the floor because we like to give our guests a few minutes to talk about their journey as a Browns fan. So we want to hear about why you're a Browns fan, how you became one, and maybe just some memories or things that are unique to your journey as a Browns fan.
Yeah, it's always I think it's a question I'm asked quite regularly when I come on to pods and stuff, and I'm more than happy to talk about it. But it is it's kind of like it's actually a difficult kind of one to pinpoint, because I kind of have different stages of fandom with the Browns. I'll talk you through it. So as a kid growing up in Ireland, we had very little access to live sports on TV. We had 2 TV channels, and we had English soccer, we had Italian soccer, and we had NFL. They were the 3 things that we had access to. There was a review program on every Monday night. I think it was Monday or Tuesday night. There would be a review program of the games that went by. So it'd be like a very very short sort of highlights program. And myself and my brothers used to watch it intently. This would have been late 80s, mid-late 80s. So I think at the time, like my memories of players who would have been watching would have been Joe Montana, Dan Marino, Jim Kelly, John Elway. That was those were the type of players we were watching. There was we weren't really supporting teams or anything. It was just kind of, we were all quite into NFL, and was always kind of had it there in the background. And I remember as I was getting older, I used to buy this NFL magazine. I don't know whether it was an American thing or whether it was for overseas or whatever, but it was the only access I had to NFL media, because again, we're talking well before computers, talking well before internet. So I used to read this magazine quite intently, and remember one day reading an article about this team that were going to be moved to another city. I remember reading this article and read through the article, and this is kind of like the clincher, really. In Irish sports, we have our sports teams. We have our Gaelic games, or Gaelic football and hurling, that we play here in Ireland, and the teams are denoted geographically. So we've 32 counties in Ireland, and each county has a team, and each county has a hard border. So if you live inside that border, that's the team you play for. It's an amateur sport, like not professional. So the notion of a team moving from one city to another was absolutely, to me, abhorrent. I could not understand why you would move a team, or how you could move a team, move a franchise, whatever. I didn't understand at the time. So the Browns were always kind of in my consciousness from then. It was the first time I kind of became aware of the Browns, and I remember the Ravens coming from that, and I always had a dislike for the Ravens. Even before I was a Browns fan, I disliked the Ravens for that reason. And this is something I think it's an interesting conversation I have with Browns fans every now and then, is because a lot of Browns fans tend to hate Steelers a bit more, or if they're from south, they might be Cincinnati, whatever, tend to hate the Steelers a bit more. But for me, it's the Ravens, and it always has been. So next thing then, that sort of cut by a few years, and we have the franchise coming back, the Browns coming back, the rebirth of the Browns. At this point, I was in school. I was 93, age was 15, 16, and I was old enough to know what things were going down, and still watching the NFL. And I started to get into it a little bit more and figure out the draft, and looking at how the draft was going. So at that point, I kind of hooked my wagon to the Browns at that point. At that point, I was old enough to realize I come from a rural area here. My father worked in steel factories, all his life growing up. We worked in steel factories when we were kids, and I really felt the blue collar vibe, the lunch pail blue collar vibe off the Browns that just really was for me. And Tim Couch, it was kind of a bit of a genesis for that. I remember being fascinated by the draft system. Again, in sports over here, we don't have that. It's completely unique in the sports world, and I got fascinated with that. So from that point, I became a big draft fan. Tim Couch, my first draft crush, as you would call it. And at that point, I was following the Browns, buying magazines, keeping up with the team. I wouldn't have called myself a massive fan at the time. They were the team I followed. I kept up with the team, blah, 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 blah. Cut forward 10 years in the advent of internet and social media and Twitter and all those lovely things, all kind of fell really nicely into the area where if you wanted to be a fan of a team from overseas, it suddenly became a lot more possible to engage with a community. I remember the first night going onto Twitter and typing in Cleveland Browns, and next thing, just boom, a whole world opened up. So since then, I would say the last 7 years, I suppose, I would have been intently following the Browns. I suppose in the 7, I probably haven't missed a game in about 7 years. Haven't missed a game in 7 years, I'd say. Pretty much like, everything that's been on. It's kind of like it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one to kind of pinpoint, but the main factors, I suppose, and the main reasons were like, once I got hooked with the fan base, once I found the fans, once I found the community online, I was completely sold. Whereas before, I was someone who looked up scores, and had a passing interest. These are my team, blah blah blah. There was nothing to shout there. There was nothing to shout for that. We're only getting to a point now where we have something to cheer on, in my lifetime as a Browns fan. But
right.
It really is the last 7 years where I felt part of the community. And then I suppose in the last 3 or 4 years, I start getting into doing a bit of writing, doing a bit of podcasting, chatting with people here and there. And, it's been a blast.
Yeah. And I did, I was so worried about how to pronounce your last name when I introduced you that we didn't talk about your podcast. So let's talk a little bit about that now, John. You do the Two Green Browns podcast. Why don't you give some information out about that?
Yeah, so the last few years, I suppose, like I just described there, I suppose I found people online, got chatting. I got invited on to, before I start doing any podcast at all, I got invited on with Paul Brown, our UK #1 fan, Paul Brown, who's the top fan, has the Paul Brown podcast. Got invited onto his show to do a St. Patrick's Day special a few years ago, and as part of that, he had another Irish guy on, Neil Dunworth, and that was my first encounter with Neil.
Okay.
So myself and Neil actually got chatting after the podcast, but we hadn't been in touch before. And Neil's on the far side of the country from me. We don't see each other that often, to be honest. Neil lives over in Galway. It's a couple of hours drive over, so I go over once or twice a year to look at games over there with himself and the backers crew that are over there. But Neil got talking, and Neil wanted to make a podcast, and I didn't have a clue what really went into the podcast. 3 weeks later, we were buying microphones and recording podcasts. Become great friends since. But this last year, we've kind of parked the Two Green Browns really for the year. This year, we've sort of we're doing a sort of a cooperative collective thing. We have this sort of project going at the minute, the Cleveland Sports Collective. You can check it out on Twitter at Cle Sports Pod. We have a little core of guys. We have 5 or 6 guys who we're kind of sharing the load with, and I was thinking it was sort of an opportunity really to get to know a few guys a bit more. And again, for me, Rod, it's all about networking. It's all about meeting people, and it's all about sharing experiences. Like, this is not a financial thing.
Sure. Yeah.
As you know, Rod, getting paid for doing podcasts would be fantastic, but it's not really. And I don't think people really understand that, but it's more of a fun thing for us. I said we got a little group together, a couple of boys. We have people that are into the Buckeyes, into fantasy, different areas of sports, and we kind of wanted to create a little forum to bring people on who never recorded pods before to get recording podcasts, and sort of just to bring them along and share our experiences with them, and it's working out really well. So it's great fun. We still have, Neil runs the Two Green Browns, the Twitter machine still, and we'll I suppose the Two Green Browns as a podcast is in hibernation to be back in the future at some point. But I said we're having too much fun sharing our experiences with the guys on the Cleveland Sports Collective at the moment. We'll kind of rock with them for the moment.
Gotcha.
It's kind of like, the more the merrier, really, in this game. Right?
That's right. Yeah, you guys were recording like almost every day or something, weren't you, with the Two Green Browns?
Oh, we did a lot. Yeah, I tell you, it's kind of the reason why we got more people involved, Rod, to be honest with you, because like you know the time and effort that goes into recording a pod, to producing a pod, and to getting it out and promoting, blah blah blah. And when there's two guys doing it, and next thing we got into a situation where we were doing a preview pod with another pod from the opposing team on Wednesday or Thursday night. That would invariably mean that Neil was staying up till 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Like it's midnight here now for us, and it's only evening time for yourself there. So very difficult to get people onto pods, and to schedule times, blah blah blah. Then we'd have a midweek pod. We might have a guest on. Then we'd have a review pod. So we were going 3 and 4 pods a week, and it got a bit tedious, and it got a bit tiresome. Now it was good fun, and we thought, we fell into a bit of a quantity over quality trap, I think. And when it stops becoming fun, that's kind of,
time to make a little change.
Yeah, you need to make a change. When you're setting an alarm clock to go off at 2 a.m. so you can get up to speak to the guy from this podcast, and just because they're in Tennessee, it kind of gets to a point where, you also, Rod, at some points have other people in your life that turn around and say, are you mad? Getting up to when you have to go to work.
I can see that.
Yeah, she's used to Monday night games now. So if you look at the times of the games, like 1 o'clock kickoffs are perfect for us because that's 6 in the evening on Sunday. That's perfect. But if you get into Sunday night kickoffs, you get into Thursday night football, Monday night football, that's me going to bed at 7 p.m. trying to get up at 12 or 1 a.m., going back to bed for 2 hours at 4 a.m. and trying to go to work the next day. And that's
rough. Yeah, that's rough.
It's just a reality for fans over here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and most people stay up for games. We're quite friendly with some of the other guys that, like, say, there's a couple of Irish accounts. There's one in particular. There's an Irish Bills fan, Buffalo Bills. He's very dedicated Bills fan over here. We're quite friendly with Andy, and he's the same as us, just doesn't miss games, and like when you get a bit more popular like the Bills do, like we did last year with our schedule last year, getting on to primetime games, like everyone thinks it's great except for Irish and UK fans.
Yeah, you guys just want all those 1 o'clock games. Yeah, makes sense. So Browns, like we've been saying, Browns went to 9-3 on Sunday, and it was quite a game, guys. Browns 41-35 over the Titans. Probably depends who you ask. I don't think it was that close. Some things happened near the end of the game to make the score look a lot closer than it actually was. It's kind of a tale of almost 2 separate games. The Browns, the first half, it was no contest. The Browns just really poured it on, kind of did whatever they wanted in the first half. And then the second half, it was kind of the Browns against the clock, just to kind of finish the game out. So, you know what? Jeff's been quiet here for a while. Jeff, let's get a couple of your thoughts on the Titans game first. Just a couple of your first, a couple of your overall impressions first off.
Yeah, we talked after the game, Rod, about how this was 2 separate halves. The first half was really I think the most complete game, if you want to call it a game, in 2 halves that the Browns have played all year, and maybe in several years. Offensively, defensively, they were really, couldn't do anything wrong. So that, that what happens then is, the game becomes so lopsided that you tend to relax a little bit and just think, okay, let's just sort of run the clock out now and not embarrass our opponent and that kind of thing. And I think that's just typical of the NFL, that you're not going to win 75-14. It's just not how the NFL works. So I wasn't really all that surprised that the second half went the way it did, just because I've seen enough NFL games to know that coaches are going to do that. They're going to put the prevent defense in. They're going to keep the ball in the middle of the field and run clock. And I know it's not a fun thing to watch, but you just had to take your fun in the first half and think about what a great half that was, and outlast the other team and get the win. So I'm not at all concerned about how they looked in the second half. I know a lot of people are up in arms. Well, they let them back in the game. Well, not really. I really don't think Tennessee was ever in that game from the time that they turned the ball back over to us on their first possession. Tennessee really was not in the game at all. So it was a comfortable win over a quality opponent, and it made me feel like this Browns team can play with anybody.
So, John, I want to get a couple of your insights from the game, and I would also like you to respond to what Jeff was talking about how that second half went. And I just want to get your thoughts on whether you think the Browns were too conservative and whether you think this is just how NFL games go. What do you expect, and how do you think that second half should have been played? You think it was done properly, or what are your thoughts there?
Well, specifically relating to the second half, we have running backs breaking off 70-yard runs and stepping out of bounds at the 1-yard line when there's no one going to tackle them, just so we don't take a chance. There appears to be so I suppose one interesting thing I saw these a lot of these stats guys, analysts, there's these guys that make the graphs and stuff that put them on Twitter. I love, I can't think of the guy's name at the minute. Something Cowboy, Stats Cowboy, or Analytics Cowboy, or something is his name. And he puts up these stats on Twitter. And the percentage of chances of winning or losing the game on that game, and the Browns Tennessee game, the bar went straight up just before halftime to basically the Browns are going to win this game and can't be beaten. And that bar didn't move in the second half. Even if the Titans got those score backs, the win probability of the Browns winning that game never changed. They weren't coming back. The same happened in the Bengals in the first game. I had friends texting me going, "Oh my God, what happened? The Bengals nearly beat you." And I was like, "No, they didn't.
It wasn't close."
What? Wasn't the thing, it wasn't the thing. So I think we just have to understand that there's an element of grind, combined with an element of, let's call it the nerds, let's call it what it is, the nerds taking over, right? So people get all bent out of shape about the whole analytics approach, blah blah blah. There's someone sitting down going, look lads, if we run X amount of plays and just don't give up 5 quick touchdowns, the game is over. So why put the ball in Baker's hands, the same amount we did in the first half, and risk, take higher risk plays? So they're taking the pressure out of the football. They're letting the air out of the football. They're basically sitting down and pretending and sort of not playing the game. It's that kind of equivalent. They're taking anything away from the opposition that can give them, breathe a bit of life into them. So it's not pretty, but it's pretty effective. I didn't like the big plays. We gave up some big plays, and I didn't like that. And this has been a bit of an enigma this year with this team. Really, I suppose is the defense. I don't really know how to analyze them. They turn the ball over when it's needed, but they give stuff up a bit more than I'd like. But in saying that, Joe Woods has a bit of a patchwork of players there that he has to deal with. So It's a tough one to analyze. Like the offensive side of the ball was flawless in the first half. That's really the story of the game. That is really the story of the game.
Yeah, when you think about this defense and Denzel Ward being out, it's pretty much Myles Garrett and and the rest of the guys right now. And I'm not trying to diminish the play of any of the rest of the guys. What I'm trying to get to is the fact that I think in prior seasons under different defensive coordinators, without naming anybody in particular, even this is the kind of defense where I think where we would have seen them not create turnovers, not really make many big plays other than Myles making some plays here and there. And I think that this defense is stepping up more than what prior editions would have done with the personnel that we're seeing. Because of the guys that are out and the fact that there were not a lot of additions to this defense in the offseason. I mean, sure, there were additions at linebacker, but these guys are also young. They're really just starting to take shape a little bit. We saw some of that just this week, in the linebackers. But I just feel like this defense with the personnel under some other defensive coordinators, I don't feel like we would have gotten anything out of this defense in some cases, other than Myles and Denzel Ward.
You look at what Greg Williams did. Greg Williams had that team, had his defense turning the ball over at a pretty spectacular rate. But then look at the last play in the Jets and the Raiders from Sunday. This defense is a bit of an enigma to me. I have a bit of a theory about this defense for next year. I think this defense could be elite next year. I think it could be elite next year. I think we're a year away, and I think we're 3 to 4 pieces away on that defense. But I think Joe Woods is actually doing such a good job with what he has. And that's we have an embarrassment of riches on our O-line. We have players on the D-line. That's another story now for who's there next year and whatever. But we literally our linebacker core is probably one of the worst rated in the league, I would imagine from what's there.
I think it would have to be. Yeah.
And like who we run at safety at the minute? We Sendejo and Carl Joseph. Now we're down Ronnie Harrison. That should be Ronnie Harrison and Grant Delpit. That's what our safety pairing should be. Our corner pairing should be Greedy Williams and Denzel Ward. It hasn't been that. We haven't had that. So again, Sendejo, I suppose, maybe has he redeemed himself a little bit the last few weeks?
Well, I'll let Jeff address that.
Do you want me to take that?
Jeff's a Sendejo guy. Go ahead.
You're a fan, Jeff.
Well, John, this is right in my sweet spot. I've made the statement that as the defense has played better as a unit, Sendejo has looked better as an individual. And why is that? Well, it's essentially because he's not having to cover for everybody else who's not doing their job. So when you see linebackers over the last couple of games actually starting to get back in coverage and defend passes, that's now something that Andrew Sendejo isn't having to cover for. Every time he misses a tackle, it's blown way out of proportion because by the time it got to him, it's a big play. He's typically playing deep, and he's the last line of defense. So I think it's more symptomatic of how the defense is constructed, and as you mentioned, missing some significant pieces, that he has taken this rap. I will readily admit that he is not the most talented player on the field or at the position, but I think he's sort of the glue that's holding this patchwork defense together right now, and trying to keep guys in the right positions and trying to cover for guys who are making mistakes out there. So I would love to see us upgrade that position next year. I think you can never have too many defensive backs. We've demonstrated that over the last several years that DBs get hurt, they go down throughout the season. We need to strengthen all of those defensive back positions. But right now we're playing with, as you said, essentially a second string at every position back there. And we're playing with some guys who really weren't supposed to be starters. And we don't have, in my mind, a true ball hawking free safety on our roster. So considering all of that, I think Joe Woods has done an admirable job of keeping games close. I mean, this is a defense that's given up over 3,000 yards in passing and 39 touchdowns, and we're 9-3. So we're doing something right.
And take a quick pause here to thank our sponsors, Skipping Stones. Guys, if you're struggling with gift ideas for Christmas, it's not too late. Just head on over to Skipping Stones on Etsy.com. Just search the store, SKIPPINSTONEZ. Lots of gift ideas there. Free shipping on qualifying orders. Make it easier on yourself. Check them out today. Now let's get back to the podcast.
That kind of relates to the enigma I was saying there, Jeff. Like, you look at the stats, like, you know what I mean, and like what you've alluded to there, that doesn't scream great defense. Do you know what I mean?
No,
it doesn't scream great defense. But somehow, when it's required, the ball pops out or someone gets stopped. Now, not all the time, but when, like, what has got us, like, I think a turning point in the game on Sunday was it Sheldon or Larry? Larry, I think, getting his hand on the ball and stripping Henry.
That was huge.
That was a pivotal play, and like that's just one play. You know what I mean? That's just one play in the day. And the rest of the time, then the chunk plays that the defense gave up after, was there like 3 or 4 plays touchdown at the start of the second half, like, and it's kind of like you're looking at both things and you're going, to me it's incongruent. The two things, it's like the two things can't live together. But what I've convinced myself is that it's personnel related, and that when we get the players back, or when we get an improvement in that area in personnel next year, that we're going to start looking at elite numbers. I suppose I talk myself into these things quite easily at the moment with the current conditions of supporting a winning team, but I can see greater, bigger things for this defense on the horizon next year. And even when you're talking about the players like Greedy and Denzel and Delpit and Ronnie Harrison starting on that team, even if we only improve the depth from those guys. Now, we don't really know what Greedy is yet, to be fair, but and Delpit for that matter. But it is an area that I think we can easily improve on. And as for the linebackers, I don't know whether they're going to invest in that position group. I really don't. I think that they might draft again and sort of maybe just keep guys like Malcolm Smith or whoever kind of rotating in around there, the old heads, Goodson, keeping the old heads in around there to kind of keep the, what they're looking from that group, I think, is average. If they can hit average with that linebacker group, I think that's the goal really there, because they can't really be seeking excellence, has to be said.
The linebackers made some plays Sunday. I mean, B.J. Goodson, he seemed to be everywhere. He made some nice plays. It's like you're saying, there's with things being incongruent, they're missing guys, they're giving up big plays, but they're making plays. And then you see guys go out, and we're getting big plays from different guys, like MJ Stewart plays, and he had that pass defense. At first, I'm like, who was that? Who knocked that ball down? I'm like, Stewart. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know he was playing, but he had 2 passes defensed and an interception. So to get that kind of performance out of a guy who wouldn't normally be playing, I think that says a lot about, it's probably Joe Woods and the defense he's playing, and it also says a lot about the coaches and their ability to have these guys ready to go, and that definitely bodes well for the future if they can put in a backup and get a performance like that out of them. It's like you said, it's I really think I agree with you, John. They might only be a few pieces away from being a very good defense, but I think that I kind of lost my train of thought. I kind of feel like they're not that far away because we're seeing so much growth out. I think we're seeing growth out of guys. And I don't want to say that this defense is going to keep getting better and better and like shut teams down. But we've seen a lot of growth in this defense over the last several weeks.
Right. One thing about the opportunistic stuff, I've watched a lot of football over the years, and it's interesting how that stuff seems to be cyclical, right? I mean, you go entire seasons where the ball never seems to bounce your way, and then all of a sudden multiple games in a row where, hey, we're getting turnovers, things are going our way. So I don't know how much of that is personnel, how much of it's system, how much of it's just good fortune. But this year, for sure, I mean, I think all those things have come together to help a really sketchy defense keep the team in games. I think what you have to be optimistic about going forward is that, this is year one of this system, this coaching staff. A lot of the personnel has carried over, but in year two, when people start to figure out their roles, now you can compare yourself to some of the other teams who have run the same systems for multiple years. And you see a team like the Steelers plug a guy in and he's productive because it's the same set of requirements year in and year out to play that position. So I think, we're already way ahead of the game offensively, from a personnel standpoint, productivity. We've got a high-powered offense. I don't think you typically both, even on a championship team, you don't get a high-powered offense and a shutdown defense. One or the other is usually enough to make you a contender, right? Yeah. So, even if we get our defense to a slightly above average level in year 2 and 3 of this organization, this group of players, by adding a few key pieces, it just takes so much pressure off the offense to be perfect all the time, right? And now you can look better winning some of these games that you're kind of looking ugly winning right now.
As Jeff casually says, year 3 of this system and regime.
Right, which is completely like mind blowing, right? That we could actually get to a 3rd year of a regime.
Yeah, how nice is that, John? Just knowing that based on this season that that Stefanski should be around for a long time.
Yeah, like year 2, never mind year 3. It's an interesting point, and like you sort of like what Jeff was alluding to there. I have another little hot takey theory that I was just actually thinking about today, relating to that. So you think the start of the season here, we finished out our season like we have been, with a bit of over the last while. We've had regime change, and the end of the year we get a new head coach, we get our new GM, whatever has to be done, and we reset the clock and we start again. That's what we do. You know what I mean? That's what we're programmed to accept as Browns fans. And then we look over to Maryland, we look over to Pittsburgh, and they have the same coaches, they have the same quarterbacks, they have all the same front office, they have new draft class that they've brought in that are all going to be fighting for places within the system that's been established for years. Okay, so we as an organization here got a very raw deal with all this COVID nonsense that we've had to deal with, because all of the teams that are firmly established, they don't miss too much of a beat starting off the year. Okay, right, teams can't meet. Fair enough. Like, Ben Roethlisberger knows what's going on with the Steelers. Like, TJ Watt knows what's going on with the Steelers. Cam Hayward knows what's going on with the Steelers. He knows what Mike Tomlin wants and what whoever. They know the drill. We have a whole new organization at the start of this year. Cleveland Browns go out and get twonked by the Ravens and the Steelers within the first 2-3 games, whatever it was. We played them early and got beaten badly. Actually, I won't forget the Ravens one for a while, because I drove to Galway, 2.5-hour drive over to meet Neil, and 2.5-hour drive back that evening to sit in a pub that was socially distanced, i.e. there was 15 people in the pub to watch the game. And I was very annoyed I had gone to such effort. But anyhow, withstanding that, we played teams that were effectively their 2019 teams, right? So they were teams like the Baltimore Ravens that like finished well. The Steelers had their hiccup, but still were the Steelers and still were hard beaten. And they come into this year ready to go, blah, blah, blah. Now here we are, week 13, 14, 15, and 16. Now all these teams are this year's team. This is this year's product. We are now seeing from week 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, we're seeing this year's product, not last year's, not the accumulation of, 2 or 3 years or whatever. We're seeing this year's product.
Right.
Have the Ravens improved?
No.
Have the Steelers improved? The Steelers are in. The Steelers, in my opinion, are in a very false position where they are at the moment. You've seen the Steelers against the Ravens last week. That was not a pretty game. You've seen the Steelers last night. That was not a pretty game. The Steelers had the Bills coming up on Sunday. They have the Ravens. Do they have the Ravens? No, they don't have the Ravens again. They have Colts, actually. Another tricky game for them. So the Steelers have a bit of work to do. So the Steelers do not look like the team that gave us a beating at the start of the season. The Ravens do not look like the team that gave us a beating at the start of the season. And the Browns do not look like the team that received those beatings at the start of the season. So right. you see where I'm going with this?
It's true.
The three teams in question, within the space of, let's call it, 10 games, the Browns have narrowed the gap between the Baltimore Ravens and the Steelers. Are we better? Are we not? Argue whichever way you want. But we have definitely significantly reduced that gap. Give us an off-season. Give us another class of rookies, and give us another free agency. I think there's big things on the way. Like, again, we're not done with this season. We're not done with this season. There's the door has been cracked open for us to have a little think and have a little look at winning the AFC North. Why not? Why not? Think about it at least. Like we beat the Ravens on Sunday or on Monday, and the Bills turned the Steelers over. That's a 1-game difference in the conference. Why not? Like, why not?
Hey, I want to throw this out for perspective, guys. And John, you alluded to this, but Ozzie Newsome was the general manager of the Ravens for 16 years, from 2002 to 2018. Okay. Generally credited as one of the best general managers that the league has had in, recent times. Consistency, right? And I'll be honest, I had to look this up because I could not have told you who the Steelers general manager was. Do either one of you guys know his name?
Does he have a very difficult to pronounce name?
No, no.
Sorry,
it's Kevin Colbert, and he's been their general manager since 2000.
No, he's not the guy who's in. They don't talk about him. All you hear about is the Rooneys and and the coach. That's it.
Right, but he's been their general manager for 21 seasons. I mean, we're talking about.
He doesn't get any credit. It's the Steelers system that does everything.
Right, but we're in year one talking about competing with two organizations that have had that kind of continuity. I think it's pretty remarkable, actually, that in as you said, John, in 10 weeks' time, we've become competitive with these guys. How much better can we be if we had anything resembling that kind of continuity over the next several seasons?
I think it's an interesting question, and just to that point you're saying, there's a lot about names being mentioned and stuff like that. Jimmy Haslam's name is very quiet in the background for the last year. It's the place for
Thank God.
That's why they're doing well.
I'm glad to think, I suppose what I'd like to think is that he's got his hands burned and he understands now. He understands, put the right guys in and piss off. You know what I mean? That's what he needs to do. And I think he's got the picture.
I hope so.
I think you're right.
No, everything about his personality says that he doesn't, because he's only being quiet because they're successful. And then the minute there's any controversy or any downturn in the rate of success, I think he's going to be right there in the front again. So I hope you're right that
let's hope that's not for
learned.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey guys, so let's move on to the Ravens game. Let's talk about this a little bit. The Ravens have lost 4 of their last 5, and of course they're playing the Cowboys tonight. Of course the Steelers almost lost the Cowboys, but I can't imagine the Ravens losing to the Cowboys. I'll let you guys comment on that if you want, but they've lost 4 out of their last 5. They have 5 losses, but I mean their losses are to Kansas City, Pittsburgh, New England, Tennessee, and Pittsburgh. So they don't really have, a terrible loss, but they really haven't looked good either. And then when you factor in the way Pittsburgh's looked and say that the Ravens have lost twice to Pittsburgh, it's not really that impressive either. So, I don't count that first game against Baltimore at all, just for all the reasons that John was talking about. I feel like that was like a preseason game for the Browns, so who cares about that game? Who has the momentum, or who has the advantage going into this game, the Browns or the Ravens? I mean, and let me tell you this, guys, the rest of the Ravens schedule, they play Dallas, Cleveland, Jacksonville, the Giants, and the Bengals. So I guarantee you Harbaugh's standing there and telling these guys, you know what? We got 5 wins left on the schedule. It's going to put us in the playoffs, guys. All we got to do is win these 5 games. We can beat all 5 of these teams.
I think you're right.
So, John, what are your thoughts? Who...
The Ravens can still win 5 games. We're still finishing ahead of them. That's
true. Yeah,
that's my initial thought.
That's true.
With specific regards to the game, and again, I don't really like talking about the schedule that much because we have the same schedule. We've had our wins. Our wins aren't what we would call quality wins, I suppose, when you look at the win-loss records or whatever of the teams we've played. But you can only beat the teams that are put in front of you. And how many years have we gone out and lost the teams we were expected to win? And we didn't this year. That's the difference, that we're winning the games we're supposed to win. But for this game that's coming up, Mark Andrews absolutely dominated us in the first game. Lamar actually had a good game. They ran the ball. We couldn't stop them. Blah, 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 blah. Like you said, preseason game, like what I said earlier, we had a brand new team. They had last year's team rolling in. It wasn't a competitive game. It's not the same. Also, we've had a lot of their team on COVID reserve for the last few weeks. They haven't been training regularly. They went something like 10 days nearly without being in the facility. They've had a couple of short weeks, that all that messing with the game. The Steelers last week, not ideal preparation. Not ideal preparation for a game. I'm quite confident. I think that the Browns can win this game. I don't think it's going to be an easy game at all. But I'm quite confident that we can. I'm actually more confident about this game than I was about the Titans game at the weekend, because I was afraid of what happened with the Raiders. That that Derrick Henry,
the run game, right?
That Derrick Henry was going to do to us what Josh Jacobs did. We couldn't stop Josh Jacobs in that. We just couldn't stop him, and that was my big fear for the game, that Derrick Henry was going to get in, they'd get a touchdown or two, and then just run the clock to death, and that'd be the end of the game. It's very difficult. Well, it had been difficult for this team to compete with that, but now, with Baker playing the way he has been in the last few weeks, and the way like he sort of stepped his game up and is playing with a lot more confidence, we're not running the ball just because we're covering up for Baker's misgivings anymore. That's what was kind of the feeling at the beginning of the year, like trying to protect Baker, or trying to keep the ball out of his hand, blah, blah. That was the kind of feeling, or the narrative, I think, maybe that was spun around the team. That's changed now. You have to respect Baker's game now on any given Sunday when he steps out on that pitch at the moment. You have to respect that game, and I think the Ravens offense has been figured out a fraction, and I think teams are figuring out, like, they're figuring out what to do with their linebackers. They're figuring out to put someone on Lamar, like. Ingram, Dobbins, whoever has been running the ball, like, they haven't exactly, set records in the last few weeks with what they're doing. On the outside, you have Marquise Brown giving out after every game that he's not getting the ball enough. They're getting Des Bryant in. They're like, now, and I'm saying that now, and Des Bryant's going to score 2 touchdowns. Wait to see. But like, actually, Des against the Cowboys tonight could be a good shout for a touchdown. But it's kind of like, I'm not afraid of them. Like, if we stop Lamar getting out of the pocket, and if we stop him getting the ball to Mark Andrews for chunk plays and easy touchdowns, I'm not that afraid of the Ravens. Do you know what I mean? I'm not that fearful of their game. So I'm calling a win here. The team I'm concerned mostly before we get to the Steelers is the Giants. I think the Giants is a trap game. I think the Giants defenses are, they weren't being concerned about. So, it's that's the game I kind of holding my breath for at the moment. Everyone has that chalked as a win, Yeah,
and the Giants, I think they're still in first place, right? First place team, and they're fighting for something, and they've really shown up in some games. So, yeah, you never know what you're getting with the Giants, but I agree. That could be a tough game. Definitely. Any thoughts on the Ravens, Jeff?
Well, I think, first of all, this is an important game from the perspective of playoff seeding. If the Ravens win this game, the first tiebreaker is head to head, right? And they would have us 2-0 if we end up with the same record. So I think from ensuring a playoff spot position, this game's important. So I hope we play our best game on Monday Night Football. For whatever reason, the Browns tend to lay an egg on national television. That's just going by history. I hope that doesn't happen. But as far as the Ravens go, I think John's on the money. They're probably thinking about how they can still make the playoffs, what their scenarios are. But I believe, and you and I have talked about this in the past, Rod, that the league has caught up to their gimmicky offense. And I think, even without outstanding personnel, I think you can put together a game plan to stop them. We've done it with other quarterbacks. We did it with Deshaun Watson. I don't see why we can't, assuming Lamar Jackson's healthy and everything else is equal. I don't see why we can't game plan like other teams have to stop them. So I was much more concerned about the Titans game than I was about the Ravens game. I think this is an important game that we get up for and we win. And then we're really in control of our playoff destiny for the rest of the season. And games like the Giants just aren't as important.
Yeah. I agree, guys. I think the Browns have a good shot in this one. So let's go to some score predictions. John, I'd like to let the guests go first. And if you want to give out any stat predictions.
Is there forecast? Is there forecast in for the weekend over there, guys?
I don't know, Jeff. Do you know the forecast for the weekend?
We're supposed to have some weather Saturday and Sunday. Rain mix of snow, but Monday is supposed to be dry. It's going to be cold in the 30s, but it's supposed to be dry.
Okay. Right. I think Baker throwing conservative enough over 200 and 2 touchdowns. I think Chubb for 100 yards and a touchdown and 28-14. 28-17.
28-17. Okay. I like that. How about you, Jeff?
I'm going to go 28-24.
I've got 30-21, so I think we're all pretty much on the same page.
I think that gets all of us to the over, doesn't it? I haven't seen the over/under on this, but it's usually around 40.
I don't think there's an over/under out yet. Maybe because the Ravens haven't played yet. It looks like Baltimore, I think, is favored by. It's 1 point. I think Baltimore's a 1 point favorite.
How is that possible? We're 2.5 games ahead of them in the standings. They're coming to our building as favorites.
Well,
and I hope that puts a huge chip on the Browns' shoulder.
As long as it puts a chip on Baker's shoulders, that's enough for me.
Right.
And is Jimmy Smith out? Did I see? Is Jimmy Smith injured, or did he get injured in the game last Thursday?
I do not know. I did not get a chance to look at Ravens injuries. I was going to, and then I thought, you know what? They're playing tonight.
No point.
So who knows? Yeah. Who knows who will be banged up by Monday, anyways.
Yeah, I see Wyatt Teller on the COVID list this evening. Not good news, but he's
he had a close contact, John. He wasn't tested positive, so those close contact quarantines can they don't necessarily rule you out for this week's game.
Be clear.
Yeah, he just needs to provide a negative test, isn't it, before and
multiples, I think. But yeah. Hopefully they'll put monstrosity of a loss. Probably the best player at his position with regards to on the team. Do you think he's I think as far as rating goes, he's probably our best player in one position, if you know what I mean. He's probably the best right guard in the league, isn't he? Isn't that crazy too? Because coming into the season, we didn't really know who our right guard was going to be.
Drew Forbes.
Yeah. So real quick, John, I think he has does he have 2 seasons left on his contract?
Not to think his contract situation, but because he's on a rookie deal, is he? Because he was only he was drafted in Buffalo, wasn't he? So
he's drafted in Buffalo. I think he has 2 seasons left at next to nothing. Would you
I think
look at extending him already?
There's a couple of players I think like this is something that kind of just in general terms I'm not really well up on the sort of the wheeling and dealing nature of the NFL. I grew up with say English football, English soccer, and the nature of transfers and money and how that all operates, and I'm really clued in with that. When it comes to NFL, I'm a little less clued in, and I think that's to do with salary cap, because it's a different animal. It's a completely different thing, and you're going to have to get into making decisions, big decisions, in the coming year here for Andrew Berry, and the Baker. I had a lot of chats about Baker even in the last few weeks. A lot of friends, a lot of my friends here that follow other teams or whatever, they are fascinated by what the Browns are going to pay Baker, and they reckon he's not worth this, but he might be worth this, and it's just the number there is going to be fascinating with what to come up with. A lot of these guys we brought in last year were all on 1-year deals, so we're going to have a lot of turnover. No matter what happens this year, we're going to have a hell of a lot of turnover. A lot of the guys that were brought in on 1-year contracts aren't going to be renewed, and they were brought in on 1-year contracts for a reason. But the likes of a Wyatt Teller is integral to our running game. The problem is now Wyatt Teller has played himself into money. He really has. Wyatt Teller is a hot commodity. Take a team like the Raiders. Take a team, someone who plays a similar system. The Titans. A team that wants to play a heavy game. Wyatt Teller is he's going to be worth so much to those teams. So we have to see where the cookie crumbles there. We're going to end up with a very, very, very expensive O-line. If we're paying Teller, we've paid Conklin, Treader's being paid, Antonio's being paid. We have Willis on his rookie deal, but that's for another few years. So it's going to be interesting. Denzel Ward, Miles has got his money. Baker is to be paid, and then we get into skill positions. What's going to happen to Nick Chubb? That's an interesting one.
It's a challenge, yeah. And I'm glad I'm not the one making the decision on all those guys. It would be tough, very tough. And I mean, the thing with Teller is I think he has 2 years left on his contract, and it's under $1 million a season. I can't remember if it's like 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 a season. So you have him really cheap for 2 years, I think.
He's actually got 1 year left in his contract.
Oh, there's only one.
Just under $1 million.
Well, if it's only 1 year left, then I think it's probably a no-brainer to try to extend him this offseason.
Yeah, it's kind of it's that thing of what do you value? You know what I mean? What do you value? I can tell you where I think the money's going to come out of. I think the money's going to come out of the wide receiver room.
Yeah.
Jarvis, both Jarvis and Odell. Now, I think we may be married to Odell Beckham for next year. I don't believe there's any way, out of that.
Not with the injury.
Yeah.
He really can't be traded because of the injury.
Yeah, and he gets his bonus or his money rolls over in March or the end of the season or whatever, and he's not going to be. He's not a tradable asset. Right. I think with the injury, Jarvis' money can be restructured. Interesting one, just to go back to Jeff's earlier point there with Sendejo, just to quickly, Sendejo, what people who sell Sendejo to me sell him on is the experience, putting people in the right places and the head on his shoulders, and he knows what he's doing, blah, blah, blah. I've had more arguments online about Jarvis Landry for the same reason for the last few years. So Jarvis Landry, there is no secret. Jarvis Landry is overpaid for his production. That's just a fact, right? There's a lot of players overpaid for their production. It's just a fact. We are under the salary cap. It doesn't matter. He's not keeping another player off the team. But what Jarvis has brought to the table, for example, moving Bryant back onto the line one of the games where they were going to give up a flag, I think at a crucial point, and he moved Harrison Bryant back onto the line or off the line or whatever it was at the time. The leadership that he's brought to the team, in my book and in my eyes, the same like with Sendejo, the value it's the intangibles. It's the bit you can't quantify. Absolutely amazing to have around the place. I would actually like them to pull Jarvis in this summer, sit him down and say, look, Jarvis, We want you here for another few years, but we're going to have to someone's eating some of that money, or you're changing your contract. Can we spread it out over 3 years? Something. Just change it, make it more flexible. And if he wants to stay, great. If he doesn't, that's fine. But it's the money will be coming out of there to pay Teller or to pay Nick Chubb. A lot of people don't believe Nick Chubb is going to get paid. I think they're possibly going to pay Nick Chubb.
I would like to see him pay Nick Chubb. I mean, it has to be a reasonable deal, but I would like to see him pay Nick Chubb.
Yeah, the argument still, Rod, when it comes in, is
you can't pay a running back and win. I know I've had a million people tell me that.
But not even I completely understand the logic of the argument, but a stronger argument is to say, look at all the running backs who have been paid, and it's not pretty, Rod. It's not pretty.
No, I know, but that's why it depends. It depends on the deal.
We have to understand that Nick Chubb is just different, and he's of superior value to the team. It's like with Zeke, getting paid. I think it's just a bad idea to pay Zeke in Dallas. I don't think it's a good idea, but I think it's a good idea to pay Chubb in Cleveland. So it's horses for courses. It's a different situation,
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope that Andrew Berry can work out, a deal with Nick Chubb that's, that works for the team and for Nick both, because you really can't strap yourself by paying the running back too much. But I think Nick would like to stay here. Kareem's here, and maybe they could work something out. We'll just have to see what happens.
Just throw this out real quick, Rod. Going back to what we were saying earlier about the stability in an organization. Dorsey had to overpay for Jarvis Landry because, just like John said, he needed that stabilizing force with a very young offensive group. So, you bring a veteran guy, a leader in like that, who can produce and who can, bring the best out in other guys, and you have to overpay, but you can afford to do that when you're in that situation with a lot of young guys. As the team becomes more stable and you don't necessarily have as many young players, you don't need that same sort of an overpaid guy. Then I start to look at what the Steelers and the Ravens do as an organization, where they start to plug guys into those roles, and then you're not having to go out and overpay for guys, and you're not having to give guys big contracts to keep them, because it's easier to plug people back into your system. So Andrew Berry's going to have some real tough choices over the next few years, because he's just not going to be able to pay everybody.
No, he's not.
So it's going to be real interesting to see how the team gets to that next level, and where they're able to do that. Where they're able to plug in guys as opposed to overpaying to keep guys.
I agree. So Jeff, any closing words?
No, I think I just gave them.
All right. John, anything you'd like to leave everybody with?
The thing I think I'd like to leave everyone with, Rod, is go and have a look at the list, the list of teams in the AFC at the moment. Have a look at who they've played. Have a look at who they're going to play, and then assess and have a little think about, who are the best teams, and rank them, and you'll get a little surprise, Rod, when you go and do that. You'll get a little surprise when you go and do that, because you'll find that the Cleveland Browns are way further up that list than you might have imagined, just even before last weekend. I think at the moment there is only one team in the AFC that is hands down clearly better than everyone else, and that's the Chiefs. After that, you can make an argument for any team, including the Cleveland Browns, to be the second best team in the AFC at the moment. So, I'd like to leave in that little thought.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you too. It really feels like, aside from that one team, things are pretty wide open this season, and that's a pretty good feeling to go along with being 9-3. So, John, we appreciate you joining us tonight. It's been great talking to you, and we haven't given out your personal Twitter handle yet. Would you like to give that out?
Yeah, you can get me. I think it's JJ Cahill _IRL, Dog Pound Ireland. Search either one of those. You'll get me on Twitter. You'll get the Cleveland Sports Collective at Cle Sports Pod, or you get Neil at the Two Green Browns account. Neil runs the Two Green Browns account, so you'll get Neil at Two Green Browns. So you get us all there. You get all our stuff there. Anything that we put out basically goes through there. So, you know, we'll see more content in the new year. Hopefully, we're getting a weird year. Normally, this is the start of draft season for myself and Neil. Haven't looked at anything yet because it's so irrelevant to the practice.
That's right. I haven't either. Haven't looked at a thing.
Come February, we'll look at the draft.
That sounds good. All right, guys. This has been the Browns Blitz, and we will catch you all next time.